What's up, friends? Welcome to the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. I'm Shaw Local Bears beat reporter Sean Hammond. Joining me, as he does every Monday and Friday, is our very own Michael Dwojak. Michael, we got Bears Rams this week. It's week 4 in the NFL. The season keeps chugging along. We're in it now. You know, it doesn't feel new anymore. We're in this thing. Where are you at? How you feeling? What are the vibes heading into week 4, Michael?
I feel like the vibes are kind of off, aren't they? I feel like the week that we've kind of had with the Bears, I feel like everyone decompressing from that Colts loss, and then Shane Waldron and Mercedes Lewis talking yesterday, and everyone kind of taking ownership here and there over what went wrong against the Colts. Obviously, the play calling, the timeouts. I feel like we're kind of at a 3 weeks in, and we're at an anxious point, and I didn't think we'd get to this point this early, and I think a lot of Bears fans are a little concerned that we're at this point this early. But a big game against the Rams, a game that I wouldn't call a must-win game, but I'm pretty close to calling it a you can't lose game. But it'll be an interesting matchup just to kind of see what happens here because there's a lot going on around this team 3 weeks in.
There is a lot going on. There's a lot of discussion. There's a lot of conversation. In some ways, it feels a little bit similar to last year, where there was a lot of discussion after week 2 about the offense and what was wrong. And in some ways, it just feels like we're doing the same thing every single year. It's the same thing all over again. But yeah, if you didn't hear what was going on at Hallis Hall yesterday, if you didn't hear or see what Shane Waldron said, I'll drop the story from yesterday in the chat here. If you're joining us live on YouTube, thank you for joining us. Do us a favor, hit the thumbs up. That's a great way to support the show. I just dropped our story in there right now. If you're listening later on Spotify or Apple, we would really appreciate it if you left us a review. That's another great way to support the show. And as always, head over to shawlocal.com. You can read all of our coverage there from the Bears. You can read our high school football coverage. Michael does great stuff on Friday nights, and all of our staff does great stuff covering high school football in Illinois. And, of course, you can read all of our news coverage throughout the northern suburbs here. So, yeah, Shane Waldron, was maybe a little bit defensive yesterday. Certainly wanted to defend, came out maybe seeming like he wanted to defend what his offense can be. And he put some of the blame on himself, certainly for that goal line situation. He pinned that on himself. He said, we got to be better. He also referenced what Caleb had said, where they needed to get to the line of scrimmage sooner on that 4th down play. And that's kind of on everybody, because that's a situation where obviously if you want to change the play, you need time to do that. And they just did not have that. And then, there were some other things too. Like you sort of previewed it. Mercedes Lewis talked yesterday. He's also going to set the tight end record for appearances this weekend. This will be his 272nd game for a tight end. That is the most ever. He's passing Jason Witten. And so that's, big day for Big Dog. But yeah, he was also asked about some of these, Shane Waldron actually brought it up himself, said that he met with the leaders on the offensive side and they had a good conversation. And of course that invited some follow-up questions. Well, what was the conversation about? And Lewis kind of said something to the effect of nobody is going to have hurt feelings. Like, they want to be coached hard. And just reading sort of between the lines, you do have to wonder, well, what's been going on these first few weeks that is leading your veteran 40-year-old tight end to say something like that?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting thing to say, right? I know obviously for the past few years, we know that Matt Eberflus has been a player's coach, but it's kind of been well known that, if something needs to be said, like Eberflus will say it. Like, I don't think he's one of these guys who is constantly on you, like maybe a Ditko was, or even probably a Jim Harbaugh. But it seemed like it was more of a coach where, he's a player coach, like he supports his players, he'll have their back. Like we've seen already this year, we haven't seen too many, call outs or anything like that. But, he'll say something. But I thought Lewis's, quotes are interesting just based on, is Shane Waldron, like he kind of said, walking on eggshells? Is he afraid to, I wouldn't say afraid, that's probably the wrong word, but
Yeah.
is he cautious about saying things to these players at this point? And I think just it's an interesting thing where it's like, is this something or is this nothing? You know what I mean? Like, is this a big deal that he's allegedly, maybe not, pushing the buttons as much as the players would want? Like I saw that, Lewis said that this isn't Pop Warner football. Like, this is the NFL. Like, they can take it. Like, they understand it. Or are they like trying to do, kid gloves with like Caleb Williams and Roma Dunze, obviously, because they're highly touted rookies. It was just an interesting thing to say because I don't think I've really heard that much from, NFL players, NFL coaches. I've never really heard a player say, "Hey, coach me more. Like, I can take it." Like that just seemed like a very interesting thing, and that's kind of why I think, it kind of caught everyone's attention yesterday, just for it to be like, that's not really something you really see often for a player to be like, "Hey, coach me more. Like, I'm a professional." It's kind of like, well, what are we doing right now? Are we not coaching? Are we, being too gentle? Like, I'm just kind of curious to know what. And that's one of those things where I think you guys talked to Waldron before you talked to Lewis. So I would have loved to be able to get a chance to go back to Waldron and say, "Yo, what is this about?"
Yeah, what does that really mean? And
Right.
yeah, like, but again, like Shane Waldron brought it up himself. He wasn't asked about it. He said, "I met with my team leaders. They had some good insight, some good thoughts." He didn't give any specifics, but clearly those are conversations that are happening. The leaders on this offensive side, Lewis, Cole Kmet, DJ Moore, Caleb Williams, those guys are giving their input, and they're saying, or at least Mercedes Lewis is saying, "Coach me harder. Like, it's okay. We can handle it." And so you just kind of got to wonder what exactly was going on before. It's got to be hard when you're a new coordinator coming into a new team where a lot of the guys have been here. They played together. I know there's a bunch of new guys too, but there's a lot of players who were here last year who went through those offensive struggles together, and they want to get this right. They want to fix it. And then so you're the new guy who's tasked with fixing it. And yeah, that's a tough situation to be in, but also that's what you signed up for. Like, that's what you're here to do. And so I don't think that you can walk on eggshells, and maybe we're reading far too much into this. That's entirely possible. I mean, just talking with some of the other media folks in the media room yesterday, I mean, there's sort of varying opinions on what exactly this all means. Maybe it's nothing. At the end of the day, as Mercedes said, the guys on the field have to figure this out. The coaches can put them in positions, and they can teach them in the film room and all that stuff, but they have to execute the plays that are called. And I mean, it's both ways. It's the coaching, it's the players. The coaches aren't out there between the lines. And so, yeah, at some point it does fall on the players too.
It's just a very interesting balance, right? Where it's kind of like, like the play call, going into the red zone last week, obviously with the third down call, fourth down call, we've talked about it. You've all heard about it ad nauseum at this point. That wasn't good. But at the same time, like, I think the running back room would say, we had 3 opportunities to score with less than 2 yards to go. That's on us. Like, we got to figure out how to get there, regardless of what the play call is. And I think they've done a good job of that right now. I think they've done a good job of a lot of the players and coaches, I think, have taken accountability. And I know people are probably tired of that word at this point too. But it honestly just comes down to just making the plays, right? Like, even whatever the play call is, there have been too many plays that just haven't worked so far. Whether you're the offensive line, whether you're wide receivers, whether you're the quarterback, whether you're the running back, it's one of those things where it's kind of like, I feel like I see a lot of people being like, well, the coaching is letting the players down, and I wouldn't disagree with that, but the players are also letting the coaches down, right? Like, they're not executing, they're not playing at the level that they should be right now. So I think it's a whole ship thing, and I think this isn't. I don't think this is a story if they have a pretty big day against the Rams on Sunday. This really felt like, oh, that's an interesting comment. But it's one of those things where it's just kind of like, all right, that's interesting, but just execute. You know what I mean?
We're going to forget all about this if they come out and they score, 30 points against the Rams defense that's given up 425 yards a game. And so that's very possible. Like, this is a defense that, they've given up 120 yards to a receiver in each of these first 3 games or more. There are holes out there to exploit. And so, yeah, that's definitely possible that we will just, forget all about this come next week. I do want to mention one other thing that Shane Waldron said that I thought was interesting. And like you watch the team, you realize this, like if you've watched the first 3 games, that Khalil Herbert is basically their goal line back. Like that's all he's being used as. And Shane actually finally said that. He said exactly that. Like Khalil Herbert is our goal line back. Obviously they want him. They were happy with Roschon Johnson. Had a nice game the other day, but of course they're not going to go away from DeAndre Swift. And I know the run game, there's a lot going on with the offensive line too that has to get figured out for any of these guys to find success. But certainly the fact that I had so many Bears fans responding to my tweet yesterday saying, how on earth is Khalil Herbert just being used as a goal line back? This is a guy who led the NFL in yards per attempt 2 years ago. You do have to wonder about the usage of those 3 guys in the running back room.
I think that's going to be really interesting. And, we'll touch on this obviously when we get into our, our predictions and all that sort of stuff, who we're expecting big games out of. But it became very clear that just listening to Waldron, just it being based on, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a game where you see more Roschon Johnson and you do see more of Khalil Herbert. Obviously, I know they said that Herbert's kind of going to be a goal line back, but at the same time, I would consider goal line situations being like 3rd and 1 or like 4th and 1. Like I don't think, I know that he said specifically goal line back, but I think anytime you need a yard or 2, you're going to use Khalil Herbert, and you should use him more often because you have that talent. And obviously, you shouldn't just be, used for that specific point. Like I think that he can be an effective running back on first down sometimes, and maybe some second down. But it's just an interesting dynamic of. I think you saw in week 1, DeAndre Swift had most of the carries. Last week, I think Roschon Johnson had more carries, but they were pretty similar at that point. I'm very curious to see against his Rams defense that, similarly to the Colts, is not a great run defense. No. I'm curious to see what do the carries kind of look like here, and is that going to change? Is Roschon Johnson your lead back now? Is he going to get more of the carries just based on performance, or do you just ride the hot hand? You know what I mean? Like if you put guys in and you see someone picking up 5 yards, you just keep going with him and keep riding that. So I'm really interested to see just what that's going to look like because I think there's a realization there that you have 3 different style running backs, you have 3 different talents there, and you need to use it because eventually, like I think we talked about this on Monday with the Colts game, but I don't think you can have Caleb throwing 55 times a game, and that's not going to be really like that'll work. Like, sure, he can throw for 360 and throw a lot, but you don't really want to become one-dimensional, especially for a rookie quarterback.
No, you don't. In the chat here, CJ says, I thought that was silly. Why is Herbert the short yardage back? Roschon is bigger. And yeah, Roschon's style too is more physical. You would think that would be a benefit in those situations. Whereas Herbert is a guy who, if he has a hole, like he's going to hit it and he'll find open space. But I don't know that I necessarily think of him as a short yardage back either. Alan Dunlap says, and thank you all for the comments, for joining the show. We really do appreciate it. Does we have to execute better? Does that include using DeAndre Carter like Mercedes Lewis to block it? And yeah, that obviously was not a situation that the Bears coaching staff was happy with. That was all on Shane Waldron, just putting guys in the wrong position. You don't want your one of your smallest wide receivers to have to block an edge rusher down at the goal line, especially like that. That is just like poor management of your guys. And I'm gonna shout out to TB17. Thanks for joining the show. He says we want Bajan. I think he's in the minority at this point, but I'll throw that up there just for fun. I see some chatter going on with that.
Chatter going on there.
So this week we sort of. You know what? Let me get to one more comment here too, because Sports Chicago Style says, why is Tyler Scott in the doghouse? And, I talked with wide receiver coach Chris Beatty yesterday, and I asked him about this, and the answer was that there's nothing like, I asked, what does Tyler Scott have to do to get on the field to play more? And His answer was just keep doing what you're doing. Simply put, he just prefers DeAndre Carter over Tyler Scott. And they have a history together. Like DeAndre Carter and Chris Beatty have worked together in the past. And Beatty was making the argument that Carter is a lot more than just a return man. And so like, that's what it comes down to. And yeah, I mean, that if you're a Tyler Scott fan, and I know there are some in the chat who really like Tyler, that's kind of where it is right now. I mean, I don't know that he's going to get a huge opportunity unless another wide receiver goes down. And that probably will happen at some point. I mean, this is how it goes. But yeah, I want to get to injuries. The two big ones this week, Darnell Wright is dealing with a back injury. And we're talking, Friday morning, it's just after 10. We don't have the Friday injury report yet. But Darnell Wright, dealing with a back injury, that's a little bit scary if you're looking at the Bears offensive line. I mean, I know that he hasn't been perfect these first 3 weeks, but he's still your first round pick a year ago. He's still one of those guys who's supposed to be relatively rock solid for your group. And then Keenan Allen has been back at practice with that heel injury. We'll see what his status is later today. If he's I imagine he might enter this game as questionable, and they'll see how he's feeling on Sunday. But we're going to have to wait and see on that. That could be an interesting addition if they get him back this week.
Yeah, I think that'll be interesting. And obviously everything comes down to the offensive line at this point for the offense to succeed, right? So I'm really curious to see. It seems pretty solid. I forget whether Matt Eberflus actually said it, but it seems like Pryor is your starting right guard, right? At that point, like he's going to start at that position.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because if Wright can't play and Pryor is pretty, I think you would rather have Pryor as your right guard, just so you have like one position, like you only have to change one position as opposed to two positions, right? If you would move Pryor over to right tackle, and then you would have him, then you have Davis, I would assume, as your right guard. But then I am curious to know, like, if Wright doesn't play, is that more of a Kieran Amagaji position? Like, do you throw him in there? Obviously, they like him as a swing tackle. Then I don't think they really want to play him as a guard or anything like that. So does he get his first NFL reps against a Rams pass rush that, just watching the tape, I think they did fairly well. The first 3 weeks of the season, they've, faced some pretty mobile quarterbacks. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But I'm curious to know, Sean, just what you think of what does the right side of that line look like if Wright doesn't play?
I think that if Darnell Wright doesn't play at right tackle, I think you're moving Matt Pryor to right tackle and you're putting Nate Davis back in the lineup at right guard. And you are feeling very shaky about the right side of the line. Everything that I've seen, I don't see any indication that they're going to just throw out Karan Amagaji with 0 preseason snaps. Sure. I know you got to play him at some point, right? Like at some point, He's got to get the reps. He's got to get in there. But I don't think they're going to just throw him out there to start a game. His first NFL appearance. He hasn't played a game since October 7th against Dartmouth. I thought that was a fun little nugget. And it's like,
little different opponent here.
Are you going to throw him out there against the Los Angeles Rams, on Sunday afternoon at Soldier Field? I don't think so. Matt Pryor is a huge hulking human being. Like he's got the size and length to play right tackle. The challenge might be when he gets a little bit quicker edge rusher. That might be a little tougher for him, but I would expect that that's the way that they go. And maybe, hopefully, Darnell Wright is back or at least limited today at practice. Maybe a full participant. Maybe he's getting back and none of this matters. But I personally think that's what they would do if that's the scenario that plays out.
Yeah, I think that'll be really interesting just to kind of see what happens. And I know we've seen, I think Rick is commenting in the group chat, Larry Borum. I think he a week away, and then is it Bates that's a couple weeks away?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah, Borum went on before the first game. So after week 4, he'll be eligible to come back. And then Bates was still on the active roster week 1. So he'd be eligible after week 5.
Right.
Hopefully you got some reinforcements coming.
Right, but for the moment you don't, right? Like at this point, you just kind of have like one of those things where I know there are a lot of Bears fans who are like, make Nate Davis, inactive. That's not you can't afford to do that at this point. Like it's not going to be a position or possibility at this point. So, it's just an interesting position because this line hasn't played well already. The injury isn't good. A back injury for an offensive lineman isn't great. That's obviously
a little scary.
one of the positions that you obviously know injury is great for any player, but a back for an offensive lineman, I feel like we've seen a lot can lead to some problems. Hopefully, Darnell's able to figure that out, but it'll be interesting to see. I agree. Maybe you put Kieran in, or maybe they do a rotation and that sort of stuff. Maybe they just kind of get, because at some point you have to give them experience, right?
That's probably what they would do. Yeah,
Yeah.
is rotate him in there for a couple series because yeah, that's the best way to get a guy some experience without throwing him out there the whole game.
Right. So maybe you do see like maybe Nate Davis is doing all right, and then you got Pryor at right tackle, and then maybe you get Kieran in there and off and on. I don't think you would have Pryor, and Nate Davis switching off. Maybe you would. I don't know. I don't know how much that kind of mixes things up and kind of causes more issues than solutions. But it will be interesting to see what they're able to do in that sort of situation, and eventually what it does. How you involve Kieran at this point.
Yeah, because I do agree that at some point you gotta get him in there, work him in there, get him some reps. You don't obviously you drafted him in the 3rd round. Like that's not a low draft pick.
No.
That's a guy that you think is capable of playing in the league and potentially starting for you one day. Some other injury news. I'll just throw a couple out here. Terrell Smith has been out with a hip injury. Zach Pickens is still dealing with the groin. He tried to go against Indianapolis and didn't make it through the game. Kevin Byard popped up on there Thursday with a back injury. And Darrell Taylor has been out. He was down on the field for a little while in the end zone there in Indianapolis. He's dealing with a knee injury. And maybe I think what might be the most important one is Andrew Billings. Completely set out practice on Thursday with a knee injury. And that's concerning because you don't really have anybody who can replicate his size and what he does for that defense.
And I don't think you really have the depth there, right? Like you don't have, like if Pickens is out too, you don't really have strong depth up the middle at anything like that. And I agree with a lot of the comments in there. Billings might be like your low key, like biggest concern at this point because it kind of goes into some matchups that we'll talk about, but you need a rush Matthew Stafford. Obviously he's an experienced quarterback and he can do a lot of great things, but he's old and he doesn't move like he used to. So I've seen a lot of, looking at the tape, a lot of the teams that, Detroit did a good job of this. I think Arizona did and San Francisco did as well. If you rush Matthew Stafford, I think that you can kind of get into his head and, rush some of his choices. And without Andrew Billings, I think that kind of hurts your line up. It hurts your line a lot, just not being able to go up the middle. And maybe that kind of makes things easier on the edges as well. So that's definitely something we'll be watching before the game on Sunday, because if Billings is already, or maybe even later today, if he's ruled out already, it'll be really interesting to see because that line needs to get pressure on Stafford for them to really limit what he's able to do.
Yeah, Rick says maybe Dwojak at tackle. And certainly, they do that a fair amount, especially in passing situations. But I don't know that you can replicate Andrew Billings against the run. CJ mentioned the Bears did sign Travis Bell to the practice squad yesterday. He's a guy they drafted a couple of years ago. Was here in Chicago for a while, left. He's back. He's a stouter dude. Not super tall, but he's stout. I don't know that they would throw him in the game this quickly this week, but I do think it's notable that they brought him back because maybe that's a sign that they're a little bit worried about Andrew Billings moving forward here. Okay, we got to dive into this game. We're gonna hit some topics here as we do every week to preview the upcoming Bears game. We got Bears Rams on Sunday from Soldier Field. Michael and I will both be there. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and head to ShawLocal.com for all of our coverage. Michael, what is your game within the game? What is your position battle that you're watching this week?
I'm looking forward to see what does the secondary do against Matthew Stafford. It'll be a really interesting matchup where I think Stafford has shown that I feel like obviously he's one of the most experienced, quarterbacks in the NFL. And he's definitely one of the most experienced quarterbacks that this defense will see this year, right? Obviously they saw Will Levis and they've seen CJ Stroud and then they saw Anthony Richardson. He's a different type of quarterback. Obviously he can't move that much, obviously. And he'll move in the pocket, but he's not running or anything like that. But So I'm really interested to see how the secondary does against a really experienced quarterback, and honestly, even just Sean McVay's offense. Like, are they able to see through, some of the some of the things that Sean McVay does that isn't real? Like, are they using him as a stunt? Or are they using him as a, kind of putting him here and you focus on him? So I'm curious to see how, the secondary kind of reads Stafford. Obviously, Stafford doesn't have his top two receivers. Cooper Kupp and Nakua are both out. So it'll be really interesting to see how much the secondary is able to kind of bait Stafford without Stafford having, a majority of his, key playmakers. He obviously helped the Rams come back against the 49ers late, to win that game. But with some more tape and some more experience, I'm really interested to see how the secondary kind of, hones in on Stafford and whether they force him into a couple mistakes.
Yeah, because he will make mistakes. I mean, he hasn't made a lot so far this year, only one interception, but
Yeah.
there have been years when they won the Super Bowl, he led the NFL in interceptions. And so
Yeah.
he, you can bait him into some mistakes. And yeah, it's really pertinent that Cooper Kupp and Puka Nakua are not available. And Kupp's not on IR, but he has not yet practiced this week. So I don't anticipate him coming back for this game. And so, yeah, that wide receiver group is not as strong as maybe it looked in week one. And, that's obviously advantage Bears. And this is the type of game where you got to take advantage of a team without its top weapons. I know Kyron Williams is still a really good running back. But as far as the passing game goes, I mean, this is an opportunity right here for the Bears. This is absolutely an opportunity. And for my game within the game, I'm picking the same position groups, but I'm going on the other side. I'm going with the Bears wide receivers against this Rams secondary that is just getting gashed.
Yeah.
I mean, they're giving up all kinds of yards. Like I said earlier, they've given up 120 yards or more to a receiver in every game. It was Jamison Williams in week 1, Marvin Harrison Jr. in week 2, and then Jawan Jennings had that big breakout game last week for the 49ers. And so I really think there's going to be an opportunity here for one or multiple of these Bears wide receivers to have a really big game, because these guys, they play a fair amount of zone, the Rams do, and it just seems like you can find those spots in the zone. And if Caleb Williams has the protection, I think he's going to be able to find his guys in good spots to pick up big yards. And especially with Keenan Allen, if Keenan Allen does come back and you got all three of your top guys, I think you're feeling really good about the Bears passing game heading into this one.
Yeah, I feel like this is a game where you really want to see the Bears, passing game eat, right? Like, obviously the Rams have given up 746, total passing yards. That's toward the bottom, that's at the bottom, bottom three, including the Giants and the Cowboys, who obviously played last week. So they would likely be bottom 2. And you've also seen the rushing attack, which isn't great, like 531 rushing yards. That's third at the bottom as well. So this is really a game where I just want to see. This is a game for all the talk about the Colts last week, all the talk about the offense this week. This is a game where you really need to see some progress, because the Rams are giving up a lot of yards at both facets. And I think this is a game where Caleb Williams needs to, I don't know if he'll throw for 363 yards, but I think this is a game where you need to see him kind of take control and make use of his weapons. And at the same time, Shane Waldron needs to use the weapons that he has in the running back room. So, I would agree with you. That's a big matchup. And I think, honestly, just in general, like a very basic offense versus defense matchup. That's very interesting to see.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, we've got our most valuable Bear, our MVB. It's bragging rights time for me, Michael. I'm 3-0.
Did we decide that you won?
So
our ride home, you made it seem like I won week 3.
I did, and then I went back and added up so we're doing it on fantasy points. Now, for defensive players, there's various different ways to count the fantasy points. I went with, I looked up a bunch of different ones. It seems like generally it's 1 point for a solo tackle, a half point for an assisted tackle, and a point for a pass defended, which would put Kevin Byard at 6. And now in half point PPR, DeAndre Swift had 5.2 points. You might fight me on that.
It's a 12-yard run that really hurt him.
That 12-yard run really put it behind. Now you can fight me on that. I don't know if Kevin Byard gets a point for a pass defended. Should Swift get a full point for his receptions? I don't know. Either way, that was pretty pitiful. I mean, Romo Dunze,
it wasn't a great matchup for us.
Romo Dunze was the pick to go with last week, and neither of us took him. So we can litigate that who really won week 3. But it's my week to go first, and I'm going to go with the hot hand. I'm taking Rome. I think Rome will have another big game. I think he will find spots in that Rams zone defense to find some open space and keep making big plays downfield. I still like DJ Moore. I still think DJ Moore is the heart and soul of this passing game and certainly the number one wide receiver. But I think Rome's hot right now. I think Rome and Caleb had a nice little connection going. I think Rome's going to have another big game this week.
I'm sticking with the wide receiver room. I'm going with DJ, actually. I think the way that things kind of opened up for Rome last week, I think that forces the Rams to pay more attention to him, right? Like obviously in week 3, after the game, DJ talked about how he was kind of being used as a decoy to kind of open things up for Rome. And I think that the Rams are going to look into that, and I think that opens things up for DJ. I think you're going to see – we've seen DJ mostly involved in the screen game, right? Like they'll dump it off to him, and then they'll leave it up to him to make a play. Especially if Keenan plays too, I think that opens things up for DJ a lot. So I'm going to go with DJ. We're both on the same track here, thinking that Caleb Williams. Maybe one of us should have chosen Caleb. It seems
probably.
It seems like we're both pretty confident that this passing offense is going to probably have its best game of the season.
And rightfully so. We've both apparently lost all confidence in DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, I'm not touching that at this point.
Yeah, that's. I mean, what are we supposed to do? Yeah, like I don't think that we can in good faith pick him to do something. I will, which kind of that does lead into my surprise prediction, and this is kind of poking fun. This is tongue in cheek a little bit, but I think DeAndre Swift is going to get to 50 rushing yards in a game, which is not actually that impressive, but that's my surprise prediction.
Running back, yeah.
That's my surprise prediction. I think he actually he's got 68 on the season through 3 games. I'll say, you know what? He gets to 50 yards this week against a bad Rams defense.
I could see it. I honestly could think. When I was thinking about my most valuable Bear, I was actually considering Roschon Johnson. I think that he's going to have a big game. I think they're going to use him a lot. I think that they noticed he did a great job. He did a very good job against the Colts, and I think they kind of realized, we went away from the hot hand, and I think that he'll be used a lot. So he was a close contender. My surprise pick, I think that this Bears secondary is going to intercept Matthew Stafford 3 times. I think that they
3 times.
I think that they've kind of shown they've started this game hot. I think the season hot, I should say. They've had a turnover every single game. They've had a pick, I think. No, I don't think they had a pick against us, Stroud, but they've had a pick in 2 of the games. And I think that just, I just am not confident in the depth that the Rams have at this point. And I think that that might force, some bad throws, that might force a bounce off and that sort of stuff. So I think that this Bears secondary is kind of going to eat in this matchup. So 3 interceptions for this Bears defense. I think I'm fairly confident. They've come close. Kevin Byard came close a couple times. There have been some near picks as well. So I'm going to go with, I think that this Bears secondary is going to have 3 interceptions.
I like that. I mean, hey, if the Bears have 3 interceptions and your guy DJ Moore has a big game, I mean, this is shaping up to be a nice Sunday for Bears fans at Soldier Field. Rick in the comments has Montez Sweat as his most valuable Bear. CJ Williams likes Roschon Johnson. CJ also pointed out that he thinks Swift is going to get one big run of 30 yards, and that'll pad the stat. Hey, however you get there, what? However you get there, you can pad the stats with one big play. I'm okay with that. I don't know off the top of my head when the last time Matthew Stafford threw 3 interceptions. If anybody has that if anybody knows that off the top of their head, throw that in the chat. I do think that is a bold prediction, Michael, and I like it. I do like it. It's a surprise. You know what? With with their wide receivers banged up, with the way this Bears secondary plays, I wouldn't be surprised if they have a couple. Obviously, three is a lot. Okay, prediction time. Game prediction. Bears Rams. What you got, Michael?
It's interesting because I felt very different about this game leaving Indianapolis than I have, throughout the week. I think after the Colts game, just looking at it, you were just kind of like, and obviously we didn't get a chance to watch the Rams 49ers game. So you just saw the score of the Rams winning and you're like, oh, like what the heck? Like they beat the 49ers. Like the Rams might actually be like secretly good even without their top playmakers. But I think this is a big opportunity for this team, right? Like this is as close to as a must-win game as you can have in week 4. Like this stretch here, you got the Panthers coming up, then you got the Jaguars, then you got the Commanders. This is a stretch where you need to go 3-1, 4-0 if you want to make the playoffs. And like this is a stretch where you need to figure things out. I think that the Bears are kind of lucky that the schedule worked out the way it did, because if they were playing the division early on, I don't think that this team would have succeeded, just based on watching how other guys are playing, the Vikings, the Packers, the Lions. Like those guys seem like they have it figured out right now. And I think it's good that the Bears aren't playing the North right now. So this is a time where you got to make you got to figure things out. This is a good game for the offense to kind of come together, both running the game and and passing it. And I think for the defense, I've got some concerns with this pass rush, but Andrew Billings isn't playing, you don't really have depth up the middle. But I think this defense has shown that it can take advantage of most of the scenarios. It can keep this team in the ball game. So I think I'll end up going with I'll do a Bears 28-17 win. Ooh. I think I'll go there. I'm kind of talking myself out of it a little bit right now as I'm kind of going through this, but I do think that the Bears offense comes alive, and I think that the Rams are pushing toward the end and trying to get a late touchdown, but I do think that the Bears are able to get a late interception, that third interception, and they're able to win this game.
I mean, yeah, if Stafford throws 3 interceptions, I like that score. I think that's a very potentially accurate score if that's a scenario. I am nervous now because we're both picking the Bears, and that doesn't seem right. Here's why I'm picking the Bears, and maybe this is my preseason bias here. I picked the Bears to start the year 2-2, and then go on a little win streak. All right, they're right here. They're 1-2. Sure, they lost last week against a very winnable game. This is still a beatable Rams team. I know they beat the 49ers. Both of those teams are really banged up. And sure, anytime you beat a team like the 49ers, that's a good win. And that scares me a little bit if I'm the Bears. Like, this is a Rams team coming off a big win. But we also see, how many times does a team come off a big win and then have a complete letdown the next week? I think this will be a tough game for the Rams. I mean, you're leaving the West Coast, you're traveling time zones. They don't always play well on the road. I know it's not you're not flying all the way to like New York or whatever, but still you're 2 hour different. It's a noon kickoff in Chicago. The crowd's going to be amped to see Caleb and everybody. I am nervous about that Bears offensive line. I don't know how you can't be. Yeah. But I still think that the Bears are going to find a way to win this game. I have them winning 23-20. I think it will be a close game. I think it will come down maybe to the final possession. But I am also picking the Bears to win this game. I think they get to 2-2. I think that they're going to have a shot to go on a little run here with a favorable schedule in this middle part of the season.
I think it'll be interesting. And I'm very curious just to know, not to go negative here, but what are the vibes if they lose this game? I'm curious to know. This feels like a game where if you go to 1-3 and then you have the Panthers coming up, and I feel like you can get as close to full doomsday. I feel like on Monday, if the Bears don't win this game, I think maybe you feel relatively good if Caleb looks great, and it just happens to be a fluky play at the end, and maybe you feel good after that, and maybe you're like, all right, this team shows what it can do. Yeah, we're 1-3, but I am very interested, just for the vibes and all that kind of stuff. This feels like a game where if you lose this game, people are calling for Matt Eberflus's head. That really can turn the vibe pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to get dark real quick, especially if Jaden Daniels keeps playing well. If the other teams in the NFC North keep playing well. Rick commented here, Stafford's last 3 interception game was 2022 against the Bills. So it's been a couple years, but that's not that long ago. Mike Johnson was asking about the record at Soldier Field. I don't have that up, but I do have his record against the Bears. Stafford's 12-9. He's thrown 23 picks in those 21 games. And the Bears have sacked him 50 times in 21 games. That's, we obviously saw that a lot back in his Lion days where the Bears, especially when Khalil Mack was here, they were getting to him. And so that's certainly something that is very team dependent, but we'll see how this Rams offensive line holds up against Montez Sweat. All right, guys, we really appreciate you joining us this morning. This has been fun as always. We're here every Monday and Friday at 10 a.m. If you want to join us live on YouTube, you can come join the fun, come see our faces on the video and join the conversation in the chat. We love chatting with you guys and getting your thoughts on the Bears. If you're listening later on Spotify or Apple, please leave us a review. If you're listening right here on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. That's a great way to support the show. Be sure to head to shawlocal.com for all of our Bears coverage. You can read my stuff. You can read Michael's stuff. You can read Sylvie up there. Sylvie's writing a column every single week. Head to shawlocal.com and please consider subscribing. That's a great way to support us. He's Michael Dwojak, Dwojak94 on Twitter. I'm Sean Hammond, Sean_Hammond on Twitter. This has been the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a great weekend.